I'm truly honored to be here and share with you my perspective, and as you'll see in the title, Employment First, More Than a Slogan. It's time, quoting Dr. Shakespeare, to suit the actions to the words. One of the things I've learned in the world of policy, getting the words in law or regulation is a good start. Changing behaviors, changing culture, changing attitudes doesn't happen when a law passes or a new regulation or a new best practice research study comes out. We have to move along to get it done. And part of what I want to say is a disclaimer today. You're going to hear some things that are going to be pretty dissonant from what you've learned or what you believe or what the culture is, where your school is or your district or whatever. I'm not here to attack. I'm not here to get you defensive. I want you to hear and listen what's possible, not in a utopian world, but going on in some places all across the country today. And again, not in the bio, but important to know, I have been extremely fortunate in this world of being in the right place at the right time. I got to spend time with the late Dr. Lou Brown at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, learning inclusion from the first guru to really promote inclusion as best practice. I got to work with the late Dr. Mark Gold, who I hope you know was a full professor here. Most people in Illinois don't even know that. And you'll see why when I show you his picture later, okay? When he was doing the beginnings of what we call customized employment, which is nothing more than task analysis and systematic instruction. Guess what? There are still people who don't know how to do it, and he was doing that in 1977 and 78. And again, you have to know this, 6 journal-published articles. IQ has no correlation to economic productivity. Over 45 years ago. We're still debating. That's going to define what the person can do or not do. So I've had that good fortune, many others along the way, to learn with them, to watch it, to see it, and get my own head jammed up to say, wow, this stuff really can work. It's not magic if you know what the heck you're doing. Okay, let us proceed. So today what I want to do is go over the status of lives of adults with DD, employment and poverty and the economics, why competitive integrated employment must be a priority. We'll learn the laws that mandate this. We'll talk a little bit about the ADA, a little bit about the difference between supported and customized employment and cost benefits. Okay. Some of you may be members of APSE or have heard about it, the Association for Professionals Supporting Employment First. Used to be Supported Employment. Like many organizations, kept the acronym, changed the verbiage or whatever. That's the motto. That's the mission. That's the vision. I've been a member for a long, long time. Employment in the general workforce, first and preferred outcome. Not subminimum wage, not a day program, not sitting at home. Okay? Why do you want to pursue it? Well, how about getting out of poverty and paying taxes? Independence. Talk to people who have moved through this with disabilities. Opportunities to make friends. How many of us have relationships with the people we work with and our colleagues, okay? People with disabilities should have that same opportunity. Make a valued contribution, and I want you to think every time you meet somebody new and you say, hi, my name's Alan, what's yours? Stacy, what's the next question you ask? What do you do? What do a lot of people with significant disabilities have to answer to that? That's part of our culture, folks. That's part of our identity, and we need to understand that. We can make a difference in how they can answer that question as adults in the community and have a valued role. That could even be as a volunteer, could be paid, could be a homemaker. There's lots of things to do, but to say I go to a day program, oh, I work over there and I put nuts and bolts together. Yay, okay. Sorry, I used to run those places too. I know what they're like. And the opportunities to learn. We all learn in our work. People with disabilities learn in their jobs, and now, as Kristen knows, and in the law, we don't talk about job placement, we talk about career development. You're not going to get to be the bagger at Jewel for 50 years and say, ain't I lucky? How many people think that's a wonderful thing when you get a kid to get a job at the Jewel? Now, if they want to be the bagger, that's great. But if they don't, Why are we doing that? Oh, because it's easy and it's stigmatized. Or wiping tables at McDonald's, okay? We got to move away from that. Here's a wonderful quote from a self-advocate. And again, my slides will be available, Stacy said, so don't try to take all the notes now because there's a lot of stuff here. But here's a self-advocate. Have a purpose in life. Have a goal. Have meaning. No different from anybody. Patty Killingsworth, retired from Tennessee. I had the pleasure to work with her and know her well. Now again, no offense to Illinois, Tennessee politically would be considered a red state, okay? Patty was heading the long-term services and supports for TennCare. Managed care, oh, that's evil, right? No, it's not if the person in charge pays for outcomes and not for cost reductions. The rates they pay there when we wrote their new waiver are wonderful. You can look it up, employment and community first choices. Still the only waiver in the United States for adults with developmental disabilities that has no facilities in it. You enter that waiver, you get a real person-centered plan by managed care case managers who have been trained by Michael Smullen Associates how to do real person-centered planning. They spent the money to do it, okay? And you sit down and you spend time with that service coordinator, case manager, and then lo and behold, you have 3 columns that you pick stuff from. Where do you want to live? You want to still live at home? Fine. You want to live by yourself? You want to live with a friend? We'll find you an affordable place and we'll build the supports around you. There are no group homes in that waiver. 2, what kind of work do you want to do? I don't know, I've never worked. Okay, we can do volunteering, we can do internship, job training, tryout, all of that stuff, discovery is in the menu. 3rd menu, when you're not working, what do you want to do? What are your interests? Oh, I'm not sure. All right, let's go do some exploration in the community about leisure, rec, social, Knights of Columbus, Kiwanis, tennis clubs, all of this kind of stuff on your interests. That's the plan, folks. A real life plan in Tennessee with the full commitment of the legislature and the governor. I've never seen that anyplace before. I was honored to be part of it. Patty recently retired. What's her connection? She was a mom. She had a daughter with cerebral palsy who passed away when she was 20 years old. But she had nothing but high expectations for her daughter, and she pushed it in the system, convinced a conservative legislature to spend the money, a governor to mandate training. I've never seen this before. Every state agency had to go to a weekend of training. And if they weren't there, they were in deep trouble. And they couldn't send somebody. It had to be the secretary, the commissioner, whoever it was, to learn about the new waiver and high expectations. They're still working at it, but if it weren't for Patty, that would never have happened. That's leadership. All right, let's get to some of the brass tacks here, and we'll even try to set aside what's been happening in Washington since January 20th. Hard to do. I want you to see what Congress says. I do policy work. Many of us focus on what's the legislation. Every federal law has within it what's called findings and purposes. Why are we doing this? Congress just doesn't pass a law. This is now 1990. We're coming up on 35 years. Why do we have a civil rights law? The continuing existence of unfair and unnecessary discrimination and prejudice denies people with disabilities, and this is all, to compete on an equal basis, all right? Pursue the opportunities for which our free society is justifiably famous, and then pay attention to this one because I'm going to haunt you with it. Cost the United States billions of dollars in unnecessary expenses from dependency and non-productivity. Now, I know it's in none of your schools, only other ones I've been to. As a kid approaches 18, what's the mom told? Oh, as soon as they turn 18, go down to Social Security, bring their birth certificate, medical records, whatever, get them on SSI, and then as soon as possible after that, get them a Medicaid card. That's going to be their lifeline. Oh, and by the way, don't let them work too much, because if they do, they'll lose their benefits, and then they could become homeless. It's all mythology, but that is still rhetoric that happens, maybe not in your school district, but in many, across the United States, because I do work for the Department of Labor. So here was Congress 35 years ago saying, we can't sustain this lifelong dependency. It's costing a lot of money. So here's the data on SSI. That's why I can pick on it. And again, this is all federal data, not mine at all. So you can see how many people are there, different types of disabilities. This is a couple of years old, year and a half. Okay, some get Social Security, DAC, whatever. Only 4.1%, okay, 1 out of 20, report any earned income. That means 19 out of 20 are sitting living on their SSI check and their Medicaid card. And if they're lucky, a SNAP card or a Link card, and if they're luckier yet, a HUD Section 811. No offense, is that the purpose of K through 12 special education as outcomes? Thank you for the nod. Yeah, and that's what we need to talk about. We need to start talking about where's the return on the investment? What are we spending for 12 years of special education if the outcome is lifelong poverty? We need to start dealing with that. You're all taxpayers, I'm a taxpayer. Where's the ROI? When I first started talking about this in the 1990s, many of my colleagues in DC wanted to kill me. No, we just need money. I said, at some point, we're going to run dry. Well, you're going to see we're close. But this is a powerful statistic, and we need to know this stuff if we're going to do the work that you do, that this is the real world. Now, here's Medicaid, and this is, again, I had this before, what's going on now. We won't even talk about if there's a cap, because I can't deal with that. But here's what you need to know, and the congressmen don't know this, the state legislators, and you probably didn't. Look at the disparity in the percentage of people who are Medicaid beneficiaries, okay? 12% are people with disabilities responsible for 1/3 of all the Medicaid money. You hear me? 12% for 1/3. Because, why? More expensive health care, mental health, and the long-term services and support, whether it's the waiver or the state institution or the private ICF. The same with seniors, 10%, 22% of the money. Again, health care, nursing homes, or waivers. So those two groups are 1/5 basically of the population responsible for over half the money. No offense, but think about if there's going to be a cap or a block grant. Who's going to get, shafted? Ain't going to be the moms and the kids of low income. They're cheap and easy. It's going to be us. Another reason we've got to get better, because think about this, and if you don't know the numbers, if somebody enters the DD system here, they come off the list and whatever at 25, and let's assume they have no employment. And they go into a group home, day program, transportation, and all that. If you're not aware, in this state, that's about $60,000 a year. And today, they're probably going to live to be 75, okay? So 60,000 times 50, $3 million for poverty and dependency, okay? How do you think that'll play on the first page of the newspaper, okay? That's on us to some extent, and I'm not trying to make people feel guilty. We can change that trajectory. I'm not saying they're not going to need Medicaid, they're not going to need supports, but probably significantly less, and we have a lot of data to prove that now. Not saying they're going to get off scot-free, or we are, but what if we could reduce that by 1/3 or 1/2? How many people could come off the wait list? How many more people could get support? How many more would be contributing to the economy, paying taxes? Okay, here's the killer one, folks. Okay, 22 years in a row, the largest group of people living in poverty are people with disabilities. You didn't know that. I know you didn't. It's a frightening statistic, and we win that race every year. Think about that. That's the outcome? Poverty, SSI, Medicaid? I know this is tough, but we need to be realistic. Even before January 20th, the cookie jar is empty. There's no more tooth fairy putting down. That's why we have wait lists. That's why there's all this pent-up demand, okay? And then here's the one that's most important. Krista knows the difference here, but most of you don't. There's a real difference between people who are seeking employment, when you see the unemployment rate and working, and people who are participating or not. This is labor statistic data. Employment participation means you're working or you're seeking employment, okay? That's together, that's the number. So look at these data, okay? About 78% of people 16 to 64, because some people are moms, homemakers, whatever, fine. When we look across all disabilities, it's about half of that. When we get to mental disability, which is mental health, autism, intellectual disability, we're down to 1 out of 4. And when we go to cognitive disability and SSI, it's about 10 to 12. Okay? So again, pretty consistent with the SSI data that 9 out of 10 people on SSI with a cognitive disability are neither working or seeking employment of any kind. Not a nice outcome. That's national. That's not picking on any state. That's collective, okay? So what's the law say? Like I said, where are the hollow promises? This is what we've done with all the federal agencies, and this is the piece that I do want you to try to put together, because it is a massive change of what the law used to be about. Since we focus a lot on people with the most significant disabilities, the DD Act was targeted for that population federally, 3 or more out of 7 functional living skills, not a label, okay? Going back, 1984 and 1990, independence, productivity, and integration. Thank you, the late Senator Lowell Weicker, who happened to be the dad of a young man with Down syndrome, chairing the key committee in Congress in the 80s. These words are defined in statute because I didn't get there till 86, but my colleague said to him, Senator, in all due deference, we want to put the definition in law. We don't quite trust the departments of how they might interpret those words. And independence gets us in a lot of trouble with parents. It's not footloose and fancy-free because none of you are any more than I am. We're all interdependent. Independence in the DD Act, exerting choice and control. That's the statutory definition. How many people with developmental disabilities get choice and control in their IEPs? Just think about it, okay? Productivity, having a meaningful role in society defined in statute. Paid work, contributing, volunteering, housework, etc. And integration and inclusion, no different than the rest of us. That law is 41 years old. It's not happening for lots of people, okay? That funds DD Councils, Protection and Advocacy, and the University Centers for Excellence. And then this is the big shift that I'm going to take you into every law. The DD Act was the very first to reject what I will call the medical deficit broken person model by saying everybody has strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, and capabilities. I want you to think about that. 41 years ago, the mold was broken. Prior to that, person with a disability, well, we got to give them a ton of OT, we got to give them a ton of PT, we got to do this, we got to do that, and never looked at what else can we do besides focus on the disability. And the message I want to take you to take home, disability should not define the person any more than your height defines you, or your weight defines you, or your hair color defines you, or your eye. It's a characteristic. You met one person with Down syndrome, you've met one person with Down syndrome. You met one person with cerebral palsy, you've met one person with cerebral palsy. I worked for UCP, as you heard. We did a person in the street survey in 1995. New York, Chicago, and LA. PR firm, hang on now. Asked people just coming down the street, you know, what's your name, blah, blah, blah. When I say the word cerebral palsy or cerebral palsy, what does it mean to you? 97.2% defined somebody that today we would call spastic quadriplegia. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't use their hands, and they're wheelchair bound. That is the public thought of what CP means. Now, some people do fit that definition. There are a lot of people with CP who have a mild gait impairment and a mild speech impairment and everything in between. So stigmatization, stereotypical thinking about labels is pervasive in our society, and I'm sorry to say, in many school districts still. Many school board members, thank you for the nods, and I'm not trying to be nasty. We've got to deal with the real world we are in. People are products of their culture, okay? Share my own experience. I grew up in Hartford, West Hartford, Connecticut. I remember seeing one kid with a disability, had a white cane. I learned he didn't see so good. He was blind. I never saw other kids with disabilities. It's a chunk of time ago. But here's what I learned culturally. On the other side of school was a place called, ready? The dummy school. Okay? I didn't even find out what it was till I was an adult and went back. But what did my friends and I do? And we weren't bigots, we weren't nasty. But we said if they can't be here with us, they can't be like us, right? They're different. So we created some gross images, and my world changed when I went to grad school, okay? And then when my daughter was born. But what I'm saying is, we're all products of our culture. Culture change doesn't happen by writing a law. It doesn't happen by passing a regulation. It happens by experience and saying, okay, I got to open up my head. I got to open up my ears and my eyes and let go, because stuff is different, and deal with the cognitive dissonance. That's a nice academic term. We all get it, but it's okay. Move on and use it. Don't just reject it. Okay, let's go back. Guy named Plato, he's even older than me. How come he knew that everybody had a gift and we don't? You see what I'm saying? That's what we need to start redoing in IEPs, in special ed. What is the talent? What is the gift? What is the characteristic? And we may have to spend time finding it out and sort of like peeling back the person, because we're so used to defining them by that label or that stigma. So we got to change our perception. So let's go to this wonderful 94-142. And again, I've added stuff in because of what's going on now about where the legislation came. This is strong bipartisan support, 1975. How many of you in the room know why Congress passed 94-142? Anybody? Okay, this is important, and again, not beating up on you. Special education is a civil rights law, folks. It's not an unfunded mandate, which is what you'll often hear, and here's why I put it in here, okay? It started by a group of parent advocates in Pennsylvania who were fed up with the local school districts saying, we don't take kids like that, or okay, we'll open up something in the basement, and we'll give you whatever, whatever. And in the code in Pennsylvania, in the 60s, you ready? To go to school for any kid, listen to the criteria: walk, talk, and be toilet trained. You hear me? Walk, talk, and be toilet trained. Show me one study that any of those three have anything to do with learning. Okay? Those were criteria to go to school. Okay? And so they brought together a group of parents, one of whom was an attorney, Denny, and it took them 2 years to get the courage to say, we got to fight this. So they agreed they wanted to sue in state court, but they needed a civil rights lawyer, and Denny wasn't one of those. So they called and they got this guy, I hope you know this name, Tom Gilhool, who was in Philadelphia, a young attorney, also a sibling. And he came out to meet with them and said, let me think about this, interesting case. And he goes back to his office, meets with them again in the household of this group of families, and said, I love your case, but we can't do this in state court. We've got to go to federal court. This is a constitutional case. Now, it took the parents 2 years to get the courage to go to state court, and then here's this young punk attorney coming saying, no, 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 and I can take it to the Supreme Court if we have to. They went to the federal district court. You can pull up the transcript, it's there. Park versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Tom Gilhool was brilliant. Again, I had the pleasure to know him, work with him some after this, not during that case. Okay? 14th Amendment, we throw this stuff around. Equal protection, due process, and deprivation of liberty. And he used a criminal justice analogy and said to the judge, and the judge was loving it, and every time he'd make a case, the Attorney General from Pennsylvania, out of order, judge would basically say, shut up, I want to hear it. Because Tom's brilliance prevailed here. These are people who were born with a disability. They didn't commit a crime. Why aren't they entitled to equal protection, due process, and then here's the deprivation of liberty. Again, this is 1975. That's where the term least restrictive environment came from. Because what Gilhool said is even if somebody is sentenced to jail, more than likely they're going to get out, they'll be on parole. They get to return to liberty, the community. You're deprived of liberty when you're put into jail. Why should these kids always have to be in a self-contained school? Okay, get them back to liberty as soon as possible. So inclusion was there, but as you'll see in a minute, that was 1975. We didn't have a lot of the tools in the toolbox. Okay? And there's, and again, in the statute, in the law, and again, education for all handicapped children, we got rid of that for all the right reasons. Half of them didn't receive an appropriate education, and 1 million were entirely excluded from school. Congress put that in the law. So we all need to know free appropriate public education is a statutory civil right. It isn't anything to do, well, we can't do your IEP because we can't afford it. That's illegal. You can't make that state. Not saying school districts don't have budget problems. If somebody's IEP needs X, Y, Z, you have to provide it, and if you get sued, you will lose. And we all need to know that, and school boards need to know that. This is a civil rights law. It's not a favor. Okay? Okay. IDEA, when we changed the name, voice vote, all children, and get at this now, now we're talking 34 years ago, the purpose of free appropriate education, prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. That's pretty clear, okay? 34 years ago. We're still debating that in lots of places, right? And there's my friend Lou Brown, and again, I'm adamant about inclusion. I love it though, think about it. You can't prepare kids for an integrated life in a segregated classroom. How do you get good social role models? How do you build relationships? Okay? You have it with peers. And we know, and you all know, if you read the research, if done with fidelity, my favorite term, staff well-trained, maybe co-teaching, good paras, even if you follow the work of Eric Carter, now moved from Vanderbilt to Baylor, on student peers being peer mentors. It's amazing. It is, and they don't hurt at all, and everybody wins, in spite of all this stuff. Well, if we spend all the time with this kid, all the rest of the kids aren't going to achieve as much. Every study that is out there says not true, and I will send a resource list to Stacy. It's all been summarized now on one sheet of paper, all the benefits of inclusion. If you know how to do it, and you're willing to spend the extra 10 grand a year doing it right, rather than all the other stuff, or spending 250 grand to send somebody to a residential school someplace. Why? No reason for it, no need, okay? Here's again, findings, okay, from Congress, not Alan Bergman, not Tash, okay? This is after almost 30 years of 94-142. Implementation, so this is now, you know, a while back, 2004, 21 years ago. Low expectations, insufficient focus on applying replicable research on proven methods of teaching and learning for children with disabilities. Almost 30 years of research has told us how to do this stuff. Now we can say there's 50 years of research. Why aren't we doing it? And that's a rhetorical. Have high expectations. Congress is saying it. Get out of the box of the stigma, the stereotype, the label. Have them be prepared to lead productive and independent life to the maximum extent possible. We're not saying everybody's going to be a Rhodes Scholar and get a PhD, but raise the bar for everybody. And don't ever let me hear you use the word that Susie plateaued. None of us plateau. I'm still learning. You're still learning. I'm not even sure when they close the box, depending on your spiritual orientation. Seriously. But how often is that a cop-out? Oh, they plateaued. We'll just babysit them till they can get out of here. Okay, I hear it. Not in Illinois, of course, just elsewhere. Okay? Here's why inclusion is the least restrictive environment. I'm not going to read this to you. This is a list of all the things we have in the toolbox today that we did not have in 1975. We didn't have non-aversive behavioral intervention. We didn't have technology, universal design for learning, all this other stuff. It's on the list. We have it now. We got to use it. We got to train staff how to use it. Okay? Okay, here we go. 04 again. Prepare them for further education, employment, independent living. And my friend Eric Carter, all about expectations. And if you haven't read any of his research, I would urge you to do it. He's now at Baylor. And if you don't know Dr. Carter, this guy is amazing. In his volunteer life at Vanderbilt, he spent a lot of time on inclusion in the faith community. Now he's directing the USED at Baylor, but he's also teaching theology, and he is teaching every future minister how to have an inclusive congregation. How the heck is that going to be cool? I can't wait to meet some of those people 5 years from now, but it's in his DNA. He said, this is my calling, okay? Transition amendments, 2004. Results-oriented process. Do you know the difference between a result and a measurable goal on an IEP? They're very different. A goal is a stepping stone to an outcome. The outcome's employment, okay? It's not a compliance piece. I was a guardian ad litem in this state for a young lady, 16 years old, go to her IEP, hang on now, and her mom was there, and she knew I had the court behind me and the attorney general, a lot of stuff going on where she had been living, not the mom. And so we go into the IEP, and of course it's all pre-prepared for next year, let's review it. And I said, let me see here what you got. Oh, for reading, hang on now, this is a 16-year-old, current reading was a wide range achievement test of 2.2, okay? What's the goal for next year for the IEP? You ready? We're going to get her to a 2.4. And I looked at them and I said, excuse me, tell me the functional difference between 2.2 and 2.4. And I'm sorry to say, they came right back. But that's a measurable goal. It'll meet the standard. That's what's in their head. They're going to be compliance, okay? And I said, here's the deal. She's 16 years old. If you told me you could get her to 5th or 6th grade, I might be willing to play. She needs to functionally be able to read. Let's rewrite this now, and you're going to go out and teach her how to read street signs, how to ride the bus maybe, how to go in the store and do some shopping, functional stuff. Oh, we don't do it like that. Well, I'm sorry, you don't do it like that. We're going to get it done that way, because then maybe we can begin to even talk about employment, at which point they went nuts. No, 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 she's going to that sheltered workshop down the street. She was already predestined. I know that doesn't happen in any of your schools. No, much. Come on, let's be honest. People are already projected at a certain time, maybe when they're 12, 14, 15. Oh, they can't work. They're going to the day program. They're going to the shelter, except we're not going to have them in this state in 5 more years. We're getting rid of sub-minimum wage, if you haven't heard that, okay? But we've got to get better at what goals are. Goals have to lead to an outcome. And that's what the result, all right? And there they are, post-secondary ed. And now we took from the DD Act and we put it in IDEA. Strengths, preferences, and interests should be driving the IEP. Every kid has got them. Our job is to explore and exploit them. Okay, this case, how many of you are familiar with the Andrew F. case? Okay, Supreme Court applies to every state, every school district, brought from Colorado. Family had a kid with autism. They weren't happy with the local school district. They sued, they put the kid in private school. They wanted the school district to pay. The federal district court said, sorry, we don't have to pay for a Cadillac. So they didn't pay. They had the nerve to take their case to the US Supreme Court. And again, politically by 2017, the court was moving a little more conservative. 8-0 decision. And again, I still want to find out why the Chief Justice wrote this. For those of you who know the courts, Chief Justices usually delegate to associate justices. I think Judge Roberts, we'll find it out someday, has a connection to disability, special ed, autism, I don't know what it is. Okay, I mean, the court had to be unanimous, but he wrote the opinion, and if you haven't seen it, when all's said and done, a student offered an education program providing merely more than de minimis progress, that would be that 2.2 to 2.4, okay, can hardly be said to have been offered an education at all. The IDEA demands more, an educational program reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. The IEP is more than a form. That's from the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. That's powerful. It's not just fill out the form, get it in the folder, and we'll see you next year. It's not about compliance. It's about outcomes. It's about cost benefit. It's about results. Whatever words you want to use based on strengths, preferences, and interests. We're not denying the disability. If the kid needs PT or OT, fine. But what else? What's inside that we can explore and exploit? Oh, they like to do computer games. Well, let's see what we can do with that and take a hobby into something that might be productive, okay? So put your different glasses on when you look at the kids and get their families to put different glasses on. Again, What's the biggest predictor? From Rich Luking, recently retired, University of Maryland. 20 years of research on transition. You and I paid for every one of those with Department of Ed money. It's all consistent as can be. I know Rich well. He started an agency before he did the PhD. I had his doctorate, but before he went to the University of Maryland in Rockville, Maryland. He was doing this with school districts all over the place, all right? Work experience during school is the best predictor of post-school employment. How come kids with disabilities don't get the opportunity to get part-time jobs after school, summer school employment, volunteering, all of that stuff? That's what most kids do. I don't know about you. I did summer work. I did some after-school stuff. I did some helping with my grandfather's plumbing business. Why aren't we putting that on the table for kids with disabilities? And they might try some stuff one summer, they don't like it. That's okay. Let's try something else next summer or after school part-time. Start thinking outside the box of only what happens in the school day. You can help make the connections for what happens after school and in the summer, because this is how careers get built, okay? Now, here's painful data. This is the most recent congressional report on IDEA from states to the federal government. It's a couple of years old, and this is on, shall we say, arrangement of class. So 80% or more included, 40 to 79%, less than 40%, and other would be self-contained school or special school or residential school or whatever. So I focused on here for us, the bottom two lines, intellectual disability. Nationally, still pretty bad in my opinion. Only 18.7% of kids with intellectual disabilities are included, 80% or more. In Illinois, 3.4%. That's 1/6, 1/5. You get it? Okay? Then you can look at the other two categories, but then go to the last one, the other. Those are the ones who are totally segregated. National average 6.4, Illinois 17.4. I didn't put it in there. We're the second lowest in the country, or second highest, okay? We got a long way to go. No wonder employment's not on the radar screen, okay? They're segregated a significant portion of the time with their own kind. That isn't how you learn. Guy way back, John McGee, first non-aversive behaviorist, Nebraska in the 80s, had a wonderful, wonderful sentence. Common sense is the least commonly used of all of our senses, okay? And his criticism then was of what were called specialized four-person group homes for behavior shaping. And he said, why would you put 4 people with complex behaviors in the same group home? And you could say the same about in the same classroom or whatever. He said, you're not going to get behavior shaping. Hear this is a PhD. You're going to get behavior sharing. So the headbanger is going to learn how to be a biter. There's going to be learning, okay, not good learning. Inclusion gives you social emotional role learning. That's how we all grow, with or without disabilities. This data is painful, even nationally in 2021. We've had the law since 1975. It's going to be 50 years old this September. I hope we can have a better party. Youth employment data, again, why is it so much less for youth with disabilities than youth without? Okay, let's go to voc rehab now. 1992, yeah, my fingerprints are all over this with my colleague, Dr. Chris Button. In the old days, voc rehab, you had to have 3 criteria: disability, barrier to employment, and then I, as the rehab counselor, got to play God. You'd come into my office, and I would determine, after reading your record, are you feasible for employment and my spending my case service dollar? And I had the authority to say, no, sorry, I'm not going to take you, okay? How this hearing went, because it's important, and I got to watch the clock fast, is we didn't have listservs. We had a fax tree in those days. We went across the country asking for how many people got rejected from voc rehab, but in spite of that still had a job and were working and were willing to come to Washington to testify. In 10 days, we had 300 people from around the country. We then picked 6 based on the states of the legislators. Don't have time to bring it all together. helped them write their testimony. After the third person, and it was cross disability, gave her testimony about her rehab agency, she had her letter of rejection. Then she came with her latest paycheck. I mean, we had the props, and a letter from her employer about how well she was doing. A member of the committee stood up and said, "What is wrong here? Voc Rehab is the agency we pay to help people like you find jobs. They didn't help you, and you got one on your own. We got to change that." The third criteria was eliminated. In law now for 33 years is a presumption of employability by anybody who shows up unless there's clear and convincing evidence, which is a civil judicial standard. It is not a test score or an IQ score, okay? Clear and convincing. And then it also went out for the, presumed to be eligible for students. And then we even defined what it is, and if you didn't know this, recipients of SSI, SSD are presumed eligible for VR because they've already gone through an assessment process to get that benefit package, okay? Here you go, Mr. Einstein. Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing it is stupid. How much do we do that to people with all types of disabilities? Seriously, we need to be reflective about this. And I said, I don't want us to be guilty. We need to take this and say, okay, what do I need to start thinking differently, doing differently tomorrow, next week, next year, and reorganizing what we're doing. And I'll give you a crude example of this. I was working with an agency in the northeastern state about 4 years ago. They were getting ready to phase out their subminimum wage, and that was good, but they were still running a place. And they had a ballpoint pen contract. Some of you may remember those from the old days. There was this board, and it had slots in it. The first person puts the bottom of the pen in, passes it along, assembly line. The next person puts the spring inside. The next person puts the ink cartridge, and the last person screws the top on. That's how they made manually in sheltered workshop ballpoint pens. So I'm watching this. The last person doing the screwing on of the top, spastic diplegia cerebral palsy. This was Einstein. There was no way this man could ever do that at a level of productivity. He was doing it, he struggled and all that, and they had a few props around. And I watched, and then afterwards I said to the director, so tell me, why was that young man doing that? You ready? He loves it. I said, what do you mean he loves it? Well, he's been doing it since he came here. I said, has he ever been offered anything else? Oh, no, because he loves it. So do you see what I'm saying? He got stuck in that job because they needed somebody to put the top on the pen. Somebody was already doing the other. Now, the good news is, Kirsten, he got customized employment with a profile. They found out this guy had a lot of skills. He ended up a year later working in a law office doing computer work with technology, making $40,000 a year. He was making 25 cents an hour doing ballpoint pens for 3 years. Okay? But you got to see this stuff. There's no way in hell he was ever going to do that job. Okay? Now that I use a cane, I can't do the marathon. I'm sorry. I can't even barely walk down the hall far enough here. Okay? No more continuum. Don't buy that stuff either. The research, I don't have time to go through all of this with you. There is no need to say somebody has to go from school to a day program, to subminimum wage, to group work, to whatever, because Dave Mank and Tom Bellamy did the research in the 80s. The probability of your getting into a real job or a real home, if you follow that logic, is you'll be 85 years old if you leave school at 18. People don't move. The continuum is part of the medical model. We're getting rid of the medical model. Everybody has competencies and can do it. Outcomes, oh my God, we've even got now strengths, resources, priorities, and all of that, and informed choice in the Rehabilitation Act since 2001. So what I'm showing you here is the alignment of our federal laws are at a place that is amazing now. We're all saying, who is the strong person? What is their identity? Choice is critical, informed choice. We even have a regulatory definition of this. You may have to spend time with a person letting them explore choices if they don't know what they are. My favorite example, you go to a fancy restaurant, okay, and you look at the menu, you've never been there before, and you say often to the wait person, gee, this sounds good. Could I have a sample? More than likely in a place like that, they'll bring you a sample. And you taste it and you say, not what I thought. Could I try this instead? Oh, yeah, I'll take an order of that. That's informed choice, not just, would you like to do this or that? Because if I only know this, how do I know what that is? That means time, folks. That means exploration. And it has to be done because many of the people have had shelters lives. They've had learned helplessness. We'll do it to you. We'll do it for you. It doesn't pay off at the end of the day. No wonder they don't have initiative. Okay? WIOA. Okay? Money set aside on transition. We put customized employment. We made clear what supported employment is. Okay? And we then define customized employment in statute. And again, based on the strengths, okay, needs, interest of the individual, tied to the interest of the employer. Job development is totally different. I don't have time to go into that today. That's another discussion. And it started with this guy. Okay, there's Mr. Hippie, PhD, here. Okay? This man was so brilliant and gifted, way ahead of his time, and he was taken from us in 1982 at the age of 52 from Hodgkin's lymphoma, okay? But the work he did before he died, people still don't know about it. I said, many studies, IQ, no correlation to economic productivity. Here he's doing the Bendix bicycle brake assembly. For those of you who remember old bikes that you put your pedals on, not up here. He grew up in a bike shop. He figured if I can learn how to do that and teach people how to do that, they can learn anything. That was his beginning of task analysis and systematic instruction. He did it with IBM electronic circuit boards at an IBM factory in Austin, Texas. And I tell you this because I know it. He went in there, I want to get some people jobs. He was doing a project in Austin. And he said, can I borrow one of your circuit boards so I can do my thing? So he comes back to them a week later. This is gorgeous. He was not an engineer. He was a PhD educator, rehab guy. And he says, I like your board, but let me tell you, I was trying to put it together, and down in this corner, it's really difficult to do whatever they were doing. And he said, I'd like to suggest maybe that if we're going to do this work for you, we do this, this, and this. 3 PhD engineers looked at him and said, oh my God, you've solved the problem we've had for a year. Okay? They redesigned the board. He got 20 people jobs there, many of whom had measured IQs between 30 and 45. They all thrived because he taught them how to assemble the board the way the factory needed it once he showed the factory how they could do it better. Mr. PhD, no engineer. So God loved this man. I'm sorry he was taken from us. Okay, customized employment has to help the employer. It's not just a favor. Okay, set of duties. Again, this is a whole nother day's discussion, but I want you to be aware now in many school districts in this country, the discovery process is being done as part of transition. And that might be something soon, Kristen, we want to have some conversations about, because Mark Gold and Associates has 5 years of data now, how this can help build really good transition plans by getting somebody in or training the teachers and staff how to do discovery, how to take back the layers and figure out who is Johnny, who is Mary, who is Sam, whoever it is. What are their interests? What we'll try some stuff. Oh, well, okay, now we've got some goals here. Let's get cooking on some outcomes. Well worth the time. And again, wonderful from some out of our field. Discovery consists of looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking someone different. Something different. Yeah, not the label. Okay? Pre-employment transition services, 15% has to be used in your office. And here's my friend Dr. Luking again saying, no readiness, we don't need that. That's the continuum stuff. We don't need to practice that kind of thing. Okay? Supported employment, made clear that half that money should go for kids. Okay? Why? Because not that many kids are working. Congress isn't stupid. They said put 50% of the voc rehab money from supported employment into the 14 to 24-year-old. Why did they do that? I mean, I called my friends in D.C. I wasn't there when this happened. They said, Alan, you know why. I said, I just want to be able to tell it. Yeah, We want a better bang for the buck. Let's invest some extra money in the 14 to 24-year-olds so they're less dependent later on and more productive. You know, Congress doesn't just do stuff up here. They can be pretty much on the ground also when they've got the information. Again, benefits of employment, you can read about this. This document, how many of you have seen this framework document from 4 federal agencies? Came out August 2022. Office of Special Ed, Office of Disability Employment Policy, Administration Community Living, and SAMHSA. Please get this. I'll send it to you, and you can put it on the website. You know, this document is magnificent. Any of you who work with the federal government know it's amazing if you can get 2 federal agencies to sign off. You've got 4 federal agencies all saying the pathway to competitive employment begins with community engagement, and that is the end goal. Too often, individuals with disabilities are unemployed, underemployed, or employed at low wages because society views their potential with low expectations. Community engagement, supported by a variety of service systems, enables individuals with disabilities to expand skills, experiences, so that may secure high-quality, personally satisfying careers and jobs and the benefits of the employment. That's a policy paper from every federal disability agency all together. Thank you, Alison Barkoff, I think at ACL, who recently left there. But they all signed off on this, folks. You need to have it. Use it in your school district. Use it with the other agencies. So the slides here give you some of it, but it's beautiful. When I first read it, it was amazing. Subminimum wage is going away, including here, okay? Now, here's one that will make you not a happy camper, okay? This is the most recent data on employment of people with developmental disabilities getting Medicaid waivers by state. This is done by ICI at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. John Butterworth now just retired, but they've been doing this for years, paid for with federal money to collect the data on adult outcomes in DD. Look at wonderful Illinois. The national average in 2022 was 23.6%. That's not even a great number. Illinois, we are 47th out of 48, but I want you to see the number. The ranking doesn't tell it to you. 3.8%. That means 96% of the adults in the DD system in Illinois today are not working or getting employment services. Look at Washington State, 82.9. No, it isn't because they got a lot of easy people. They've got a commitment, and employment first is a priority with money on the table. In fact, they got the federal government, Medicaid, to agree, thanks to the leadership in that state, that when you enter the adult DD system, you don't get a choice about work. You must spend the first 9 months, very much like what's going on in Tennessee, in exploration, discovery, volunteer, whatever. Guess what? Somebody gets a taste of work and a paycheck. What do they want to keep doing? They want to keep working. Microsoft, you've heard of that crummy little company? They got a campus up there. Okay, they're a big employer of people with disabilities. They do a lot of technology stuff for people with disabilities. They have on their campus, I think it's 5,000 people working there, 4,000. Across the campus, not in a group, they have now almost 200 people with developmental disabilities working in jobs of their choice and their expertise. They realize they're such a critical part of the workforce. They had 4 of their staff get trained by a company called WISE how to be job coaches and supporters. They float around the campus enhancing their productivity regularly, not a private agency, not Voc Rehab, not DD, because they want to maintain that investment of those 200 workers. We know this stuff can happen. They're not doing it for charity, believe me. That's not the goal of the CEO of Microsoft, and we don't want that. But look at those numbers, folks. And to some extent, that's because of what didn't happen in school. I mean, we've got to connect the dots. If all those kids had had decent transition plans in employment, the odds are they would have done better coming into the adult system, okay? All right, Rob Chimera, economist. Talk about return on investment, supported employment versus facility-based sheltered workshop, okay? No, you don't. Here, this is his quote. Regardless of disability or severity, supported employment has a better return on investment than sheltered workshop. That's an economist. 2010. okay? Who are the slow learners? Oh, sorry. All right, Medicaid, when they came on to do this, I have to tell you, I was blown away. This is a medical health agency, right? This is 2011. Look at these words. This is in a policy letter. Meaningful work's been associated with positive physical and mental health benefits, part of building a better, healthy lifestyle as a contributing member. Guess what? They're the health insurance agency. They know that work is healthier than non-work. My favorite line is, work may be stressful, non-work is much more stressful. Just look at what happened in the pandemic with depression and suicide. Beautiful example. And then look at this. I highlighted, this is their stuff, they trust me. All individuals, regardless of disability and age, can work and work optimally with opportunity, training, and support that build on each person's strengths and interests. We now have across every funding stream, strengths and interests is what we build on, their plans, their careers, their jobs, their lives, not their disability label, their quadriplegia, their funny-looking eyes, their spasticity, they're not walking well, they're not seeing well, they're not talking well. Okay? No, those are things we have to deal with, but they don't define you. Okay? Iowa data. You want to talk about cost benefit? They studied people a year before and a year after they went to work. Look how much money they saved in Medicaid. 21 million bucks. There it is. That's the hard data. When people go to work, they're healthier. Didn't say they didn't have any. Didn't say they didn't have way. Mental health costs went way down. When you're home alone, my daughter, Dina, who was mentioned earlier, during the pandemic, she's a social person. Her physical health issues and mental health issues went off the wall. She wasn't going to work. She couldn't go out. She has asthma, so she had to be extremely sensitive and whatever. And I just saw her bills skyrocketed. Not that they're zero when she's working, but they're down here when she wasn't working like that. Classic example. I lived it. I saw it, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it because there wasn't a place she could safely work for a couple of years. Okay? But we know this stuff's important. Again, Dr. Galen, how come we don't know this? Employment is nature's best physician, essential to human happiness. Again, he's been around. This is on the SAMHSA website, by the way. All right, so here's where we got to go. I'll wrap it up, I hope, in a couple of minutes, Stacy. The old paradigm is you have to accept the life of poverty. We don't have time to talk about, how many of you know about the WIPA program, W-I-P-A? Oh, thank God. Okay, every family and every teacher needs to know about benefits planning. It's been in the law since 1999. The biggest myth out there is you'll lose benefits if you go to work. I can tell you today, with the wages that they are, if somebody were to go to work 20 hours a week, $15 an hour on SSI, their SSI would go down, but they wouldn't come out zero. I think they'd end up with about $300 on SSI, but they'd get to keep all of their paycheck, plus pay taxes, plus pay into FICA, and at the end of a certain number of quarters, they would move from SSI to SSDI, and 2 years later move to Medicare. I'm giving you a very simplified version, okay? Every person needs to know that, and that you can work. And then there's the ABLE accounts, okay? 100 grand, and it doesn't count against anything. There's the ADA goals. They apply to everybody. There are no exceptions. That's what I say when you raise the bar, and that should be the expectation for every child with a disability, regardless of complexity, okay? You may not get there. Mountain climbers in the room? What's the goal of everybody who's climbing mountains? Get to the top. Do they all get there? No. Do they ever change the goal? No. These goals must apply to every one of your students, because if you lower the bar, that's when you're going to say, see, we told you, she plateaued, all done, finished. That's all she can expect. You never know till you try. Lawsuit in Oregon by self-advocates who wanted to get out of sheltered workshop. Beautiful case. It was settled. They had to do a lot of things. Their data are way up now. I'm not going to read it all to you. But here's what the Fed said. Millions of individuals spend the majority of their daytime hours receiving employment and day services in segregated sheltered workshops and day settings. Okay, civil rights are violated, et cetera. And then here's the CMS stuff. And lastly, I'll leave you with employment. Oh my God, this was a private research firm in HR, knew nothing about disability, did it for Project Search and a couple of other groups several years ago. And guess what? The employers like hiring people with disabilities. If they're trained, if they get support, they fit nicely, they change a bit. The perception, oh, this is a good employer. They hire people with disabilities. They're part of the culture. That word gets out. It's a good thing for business. There's a lot of money in the disability family community to spend. Their expectations were beyond belief what happened, okay? This is the ratings from all the employers. You can read them at your will. So we got to move to a system now that talks about accountability for outcomes and a return on an investment for all the stakeholders. It's a must. Forget January 20th. Even before that, I was saying this, okay? Employed, integrated environments, wages, contributing, belonging to the community, paying taxes, FICA, paying into Medicare, savings accounts, ABLE accounts, get out of poverty, increased independence, self-esteem, friendships, improved health and mental health, I've showed you, reduced SSI, Medicaid staff, saving billions of dollars to the taxpayer. That's a good deal, even in a good economic environment. And then I'll end you with this one to think about if this is you. This is now in 3 federal laws, okay? Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the rights of individuals to live independently, enjoy self-determination, make choices, contribute to society, pursue meaningful careers, enjoy full inclusion and integration in the economic, political, social, cultural, and educational mainstream of American society. Guess what? The disability community maintains open enrollment, as I say, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and it doesn't discriminate based on age, gender, sexual preference, race, religion, ethnicity, social economic status, or political party, okay? We are an inclusive group. Just think about if you have a kid who's typical and tomorrow they join the disability club. How would you want them treated? Differently or the same? If you or your spouse or your parent or your sibling join the disability club, because it can happen, an injury, an accident, MS starts at 30, a stroke. Think about all these things. I joined recently. I mean, I got a bad knee. I got a bit of a balance problem. If it doesn't get any worse than that, not such a big deal. I got to use a cane. I got to go slow. In the airports now, I get wheelchair assist to go to baggage claim. Okay, it's there. I'll do it. But it doesn't change who I am. I make a few accommodations. So I want us to all think as we wind this down, this could be you tomorrow. This could be your son or daughter, your grandson or your granddaughter, your niece or your nephew. Why should they be seen as any less worthy to have outcomes and goals and a quality life than anybody else who is temporary? And again now, the new word is belonging. We've gone beyond inclusion. Belonging says you're here, your workers know it. Oh, where's Alan today? Well, he wasn't feeling well. Or the bowling team or the club or wherever it is. As opposed to, oh, there's a vacant chair for that, whatever. You're a relationship. There you have it. Thank you all very much.